What's up, everybody, and welcome to the iReach podcast. I'm your host, Paul Robinson, founder and CEO of ConstructReach, a national consultancy and initiative that aims to diversify the construction, design, and innovation industries and empower a younger generation. Every single week, we are here merging education, industry, and culture with a variety of featured guests that you do not want to miss. So let's go, iReach. All right. And welcome back to the iReach podcast, everybody. I am Paul Robinson. I have got, and I know I say this every week now, but I really do have some special guests. Today, we've got a very special guest here with us. We've got Miss Jennifer Cury, who is here. Jennifer, thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the iReach podcast. It's been a while since we got a chance to connect, but I'm so happy we're here today. How you doing?
Thank you so much, Paul. I cannot say enough. I'm very excited to be here. This is a topic near and dear to my heart. So I'm really, really excited to be here with you today.
Good. Well, you know what? I got some questions for you. You've got a wealth of knowledge that I just know you are going to expound on, blow our minds for our listening audience here, educate us in the process. But just go ahead and tell us a little bit about you. Tell us about your journey. How did you get to where you are?
Okay, so a little bit about me. I'm originally from Kentucky and got my bachelor's degree at Western Kentucky University. So I'm a hilltopper. And then from there, I decided to take a job at the Louisville Police Department investigating crimes against children, sexual assault. And I did that for 5.5 years. After that, I wanted to see kids get better. So I became a school counselor. I got my master's degree at Vanderbilt University, and that was a degree in human development counseling. I've been an elementary, a middle, and a high school counselor and learned a lot about kids in that work. And school counselors really focus on the academic, social, emotional, and the career development of students. During that time, I had a really great focus on what it was that helped kids to overcome things like anxiety and depression and to feel hopeful about their futures. And I really started to hone in on career. And a lot of people will tell you, wow, seems like kids are having a lot of trauma and they're really struggling. But I found that if I helped them find a pathway forward for their life, that a lot of kids could overcome some of that. And so career became a real predominant part of what I was doing, and found that very exciting, especially for kids who were struggling. I worked in an inner city school. I've worked in a military school, and kids who were having really difficult times. Worked in military school after 9/11, and that was a really difficult time. And then worked in an inner city school with a lot of gang activity, but found that kids could be hopeful and find a way forward.
Wow, no, that is amazing. Yeah, thank you. And it just seems like throughout your story, and your professional journey, kids have been interwoven into that, right? Like you care deeply about young people, you care deeply about the youth, and you're in tune to the different contexts in which young people grow up in. And I think that is very key and core and central because as you're looking at things maybe from the outside in, from an employer perspective or from an adult perspective, sometimes it's really important to be in tune about knowing your audience, right? And knowing the context in which a person is coming from, so that you can actually see maybe beyond what meets the eye and understanding the why. So it seems like children have been interwoven throughout your entire career journey. And, as we're talking about the importance of having opportunities for young people, as we're talking about this industry of construction, design, innovation, and how do we begin to put these different career pathways in front of not only just a younger demographic, but the most diverse demographic that we've ever had. That begins to bring in a lot of your experience and expertise as we look at the different contexts that maybe individuals are coming from.
I think you really hit the nail on the head. We are more diverse than ever in this country, and being able to see the context in which a person comes from really allows you to look at them as an individual and think about what they are bringing into an employment setting. One time I interviewed with a principal for a job, and he asked me this question. I'll never forget it. He said, "Who do you think is most at risk?" And I said, "Well, I think that every student is at risk. Every student has some risk." But I said, "I think the more important question is this: what do I see as the strengths that every student has?"
Mm,
And I think, for so long, there's this kind of glass is half empty view of certain populations. Are we looking at people coming into the workforce as bringing deficits? Or are we looking at them as bringing strengths? And if we are looking at them as bringing deficits, then we're missing the boat. We need to not be looking at people that way, whether it's because they're coming from a certain generation, because they're coming from a certain population, maybe they speak a different language, maybe they look a different way from us.
yeah.
That's not a great view to have of other people. If we can look at people from a strengths perspective and think that we have something to learn from them and have humility, then we're more likely to capitalize on those strengths and have a much better and stronger workforce and
Mm.
employment.
Wow, no, that is great. I mean, that is very insightful. I often say everybody has something, right? Nobody has everything. Nobody has a monopoly on all of the gifts, right? But it keeps us in constant need of one another because we are wired, we are built and designed for community. So everybody has something. And it made me think about that because when you started to talk about being more focused on the strengths as opposed to the deficits, now you begin to see what a person is working with, right? You begin to see potential. You begin to see, okay, well, how can I help alleviate maybe some of those barriers so that they can be what they have the potential and the capacity to become?
Exactly. And we need to start focusing more in that capacity. And I think that we can do that, and hopefully start to shift our thinking about the workforce.
Yes, yes, yes. So, quick question for you here. How important, right? How important is it for young people to have early exposure to different careers?
I think it's everything. So I often say this to superintendents and principals.
Hmm.
I wouldn't expect a person who's a senior in high school or a freshman in college to take calculus if they had never learned addition when they
Mhm.
were kindergarten or first grade student. Career development is actually the same way. So we want people to have lots of exposure early in life because careers are sequential, they're developmental, and we start to learn about them very, very early. So children can learn lots about careers just in their own community, learning about what the mail delivery person does, learning about what a cashier does at the grocery store, learning about what somebody does, the firefighter, the person who's driving the ambulance. All of these people who are in our community that are helpers are important people for students to start to learn about. Um, but in addition to that, when I think about things like construction careers, what's really exciting to me about that is that there are lots of opportunities, even for families, to do this for free. Lowe's and Home Depot have brought back their free do-it-yourself workshops for kids. You can
Yes.
pick up these kits for free. I think every child, male, female, needs to learn how to use a hammer. They need that self-efficacy. They need to know just for their life skills to know how to use those kinds of kits. In addition, touch a truck. I don't know if any of you know what touch a truck is, but
Touch
if
a
you're
truck. Okay.
Touch a Truck has come back. There was a little bit of a lull in Touch a Truck during COVID, but if you do not know what Touch a Truck is, I cannot say enough about this program. So Touch a Truck is in a lot of cities all over the country, and the program basically allows children to meet people who work in lots of different occupations, and their vehicles that they use in their occupations. So you might meet an EMT and get to see their ambulance. But the best part is not only meeting the EMT and hearing what they do, but kids actually get to climb inside that ambulance. They get to touch the things that are inside an ambulance. You get to meet somebody who works at a construction site, and you not only get to hear about an excavator, but you actually get to touch an excavator and climb around on an excavator. So a dump truck, getting to see a firefighter and actually get on a fire truck.
Wow.
And that early exposure matters so much, because now they're not only seeing, well, there's a person who does that job, but they're seeing themselves in that role. Could I be a person who could drive a fire truck? Well, yeah, I mean, I got inside one today. I actually felt the steering wheel, and seeing those construction careers. In fact, when they go in to touch a truck, they're given a construction hat to wear and a little vest, and
Oh,
I
nice.
just love that. So if you have not been to touch a truck, and I tell you, they happen usually in the spring, but wherever you are, look up touch a truck and see if there's one near you and go to it.
Yeah.
Um, maker fairs. Maker fairs are happening all over the country. I can't say enough. Most of the time they're free. They're usually at a library. Families should get to these, because kids are learning a lot about innovation, building, doing all sorts of things. So there's lots of free opportunities, but career exposure just matters so much, and they're getting to see firsthand, how can I do these things myself?
Yeah, no, that is such good insight, because just last episode, I mean, we were just talking with a work-based learning coordinator, and we were talking about the importance of immersive experiences, and how, they are seen as an educator, as a counselor, they're seeing kids that get a chance to participate in what they're being taught, to have a hands-on experience in these different career pathways that are being put in front of them. And that is having such an amazing and pretty much astounding impact on their takeaways, on really learning and connecting the information and the career pathway with their skill sets. And it's just an amazing thing, to where once you get a chance to touch it, once you get a chance to actually feel it, and you can actually experience what's being communicated to you, now you can actually see that being a possibility. And it's just icing on the cake when you can actually see somebody that looks like you as well. I often say
Absolutely.
as well, if you can't see yourself in this, then you can't see yourself, right? And so
Right.
being able to identify with those who look like you, that come from where you come from, is such a powerful tool when we're introducing what's possible in the different career pathways and this industry of construction. I mean, you think about the large industry that it is. I mean, it's an economic indicator, right? Like, that's how large of an industry this is. When we want to assess the health of the economy, one of the things that we're looking at is how much construction is going on, right? So you already know it's a huge sector of business. It plays a large role in our society. And when we don't have the makeup that is representative of our working demographic, our working class, then we definitely have to do something about that, because those are so many key positions and key jobs that are in front of and are going on in the community on an everyday basis, where if a young person doesn't see themselves in it, then they're automatically canceling themselves out as being in that career.
That's right. And we know that people need to have an identity related to the career. So absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, no, that is spot on. Man, no, this is so good. So when you think about the importance of exposing young people to career pathways at an early age, and you've had a lot of work around this area, you've had a lot of work with youth just in general, being endowed, right? That is something that others care very deeply about, right? Supporting the research, supporting the work that you do. It's definitely work that matters. Talk to me a little bit about maybe the statistics that you're seeing around how important it is, that we are introducing what's possible and what's available to young people at an early age, and taking into account the different contexts that they're coming from, and being able to tailor a message to them based on where they're coming from.
There's so much data on this. The data is completely overwhelming. And I wish that I could say that the trends have reversed as we've learned more, but in fact, we know that the gap continues to persist.
Yes.
So a little bit of data, really, I don't want to just overwhelm people with statistics. But we know, for example, first generation college students, so students who are the first in their family to maybe get a chance to go on to college. They don't have a parent with a bachelor's degree. They don't have anyone in their immediate family that has got a bachelor's degree. Those students in particular over their life are going to make less money. If they don't have a parent with that education, the chances that they are going to get a degree is substantially less. 70% of adults ages 22 to 59 who had a parent with a bachelor's degree have completed a bachelor's degree themselves. Now, conversely, this is like where we start to see the problem. Only 26% of their peers who do not have a college educated parent have completed that degree. So it's a continual pattern. And then you have the parents who, again, don't have that bachelor's degree. Financial outcomes for their children continue to persist. Students who are first generation college students and they go ahead and get a college degree are going to make about $99,000 on the median. Whereas students whose parents did have a college degree, their median salary is going to be about $135,800. So just the difference in money from having one parent to have a degree versus not having a parent to have a degree, even if you get a college degree yourself. And why? Why would that happen? People say, well, what could be the big difference? Knowing how to invest money, knowing how to spend money, knowing how to whether or not to take out student loans, how much to take out, what type of loans to get. It makes a huge impact on people over the course of their entire life. And we're not talking enough about what kind of impact it's making. So there are lots of statistics out there that support equity, access, and we could talk about it all day. There's tons of statistics.
Yeah. No,
But the problem is that it's ongoing and we know it's a problem, and yet we're not really fixing it as well as we could.
Yeah. No, it's a ton of work to be done, that's one of our main reasons for existing, right? As ConstructReach, the work that we do, it's why we do this podcast, and hearing just the state of the industry from different perspectives through the lens of a brand, or, an employer within the industry, or an educator, or what have you, young people, right? Because we want to begin to connect the dots. We want to begin to keep the conversation going about how much work is needed. And one of the things that I do love about the uniqueness of construction is that because it's such a large sector, and because there's so many different career pathways that exist, now you have both degreed and non-degreed routes that you can take. And we're actually starting to see that trend take place in, let's call it K through 12 now, where you have educators beginning to celebrate something other, right, than just going to a 4-year degree college and university, right? And so looking at the amount of jobs that are available, and how do we begin, again, that goes back to your early point, with providing career accessibility and exposure at a very young and early age, but also making sure that we take into account where they're coming from, tailoring that message so that we take into account who our audience is, right? Even from a child perspective, even from a young person's perspective, growing up, and making sure that we're putting them in the best position to succeed. But then within this industry, there's just so many different avenues and routes that one can take that gets at the equity piece of it as well. I always say we see the disparities come in 3 areas, and these are not the only 3 areas. But when you think about jobs, when you think about healthcare, and when you think about education, those are the 3 areas, 3 pillars, if you will, where we really see a lot of the disparities come to the forefront. And when you think about this industry that has a retirement crisis that's looming and hovering over it, where they need to backfill these positions, but they're not backfilling them at the same rate that people are aging out and retiring out. For one, you can't just fill those positions because you have to understand who that working demographic is now, who that young demographic is now, how diverse they are, the most diverse that they have ever been, and also recognize and come to grips with the industries has had a long-standing area of opportunity to have a culture that is conducive to a minority success. So that lends itself to employers in the industry having to take notice and do that work within the confines of their company culture to make sure that they're healthy enough to receive this young talent, but then also for educators in the community to get around celebrating those who want to go in this industry, and then making sure that we're putting them in a position to where they see this as a preeminent choice. They are in an environment that cultivates that type of career pathway, and then they are supported, right, once they make that decision and celebrate it. And so having that continuity between industry and education, and having that partnership between industry and education is why we do what we do. It's why we have this iReach podcast, where we get a chance to mix and merge, those different perspectives so that we can put young people in the best position to succeed.
Paul, you just said so much that's so important. I can't even, there's so much there. First off, the college payoff. For so long, under No Child Left Behind, we told everybody to go to a 4-year university, and it didn't pay off, right? Yeah. So people were told over and over, go to a 4-year university, go and get these 4-year degrees. And everybody was sent through the same routes pretty much through high school. But like you said, now there's these other opportunities through CTE. There's these other pathways. Yes. And to get to technical school, to get to community college, 4-year university. And there's all of these pathways when you look at construction, which is one of the really great things about the construction industry. And all of them have a high payoff. All of them have a high payoff. You can even leave high school with certifications, industry-based credentials. Yes. From high school, which is unreal, right? That wasn't even an option 10 years ago, right? So that's really an outstanding opportunity. Now, backing up from there, you also made an excellent point that students don't have to go through a whole bunch of debt, but we haven't done a fantastic job yet of conveying that to parents. So having educators understand it, having educators who are really communicating that well to parents, what these opportunities are, and changing those biases against, maybe going other pathways. What are the pathways and what do they lead to? And these are outstanding careers. So not having those biases. And then the third thing that you said that I really think is so important, and I'm going to tell a really very, very, very fast story. Okay. Is that we need to have a very welcoming environment when people come into the construction industry. I tell the story about a young man who was biracial that I met. I wrote a book about apprenticeships for the American School Counselor Association back in 2017. I wrote the book. And a young man who was biracial told a story about working with some electricians. And they would hide his tools and stuff and just joke around. They thought it was really funny to do this, but they had a nickname for him. And the nickname they gave him was Oreo. And this was really, really offensive to this young man, and more so even than the hiding the tools and the joking around. And he ended up leaving. So this was a person who liked the work he was doing. Yeah. He enjoyed being on a pathway to become an electrician. He was an apprentice, and he left because he did not want to be made fun of. He did not think it was funny to have his race made fun of. And we have to change that culture. These kinds of things are not tolerable. It's not funny. And to make fun of a person's personal physical characteristics simply should not be tolerated. So we have to change that. That's not acceptable.
Yeah, no, yeah. Thanks for sharing. Right. I mean, and it's definitely something that we're trying to attack and address in a very intentional way. Is how do we mitigate those stories? Because even if things are beginning to take shape and form in a different way, in a positive way, to where the industry is more welcoming. I mean, that's the work that we do all day, every day, is to consult companies on developing this culture that is conducive to a minority's success and making sure that they're healthy enough to receive the young talent that ultimately they need, right? But you touched on something that is really important, because if I have a negative experience, I'm going to go and tell 25 other people, don't do what I just did. So now you keep that negative connotation, in constant motion about the industry not being welcoming, not being for you if you are a minority, because it's got such a long-standing, history. And there's tons and tons and tons of those type of stories where those who were not as represented felt that shame, and they felt isolated, right? And ended up leaving the industry. And so that's definitely something that we have to come against. We have to own that, right, as an industry, so that we can move forward past it. Because if we don't own it, then we can't move past it, right? And so that's definitely something that we try to talk through. And it's leading in vulnerability. You're not going to be a perfect company, but you can be healthy, right? And you can begin to do things to put yourself in a position to be healthy, and then be intentional with who you're recruiting, the partnerships that you are establishing in community or other workforce development organizations or other nonprofit organizations that may be trying to expose or position young people of color for opportunities, or women within this industry that's not as represented as they should be as well. And so it's just taking into account all of those different components, understanding where we come from, leaning into that, right? Accepting that and saying, hey, you know what? I've got to acknowledge that so that we can move forward. And although you haven't had, let's say, a positive outlook in the past, this is what we're doing to change that. And I think the industry has to amplify that message more, because young people, before they even make a decision about this industry, they're having those conversations with their counselors, and they're having those conversations with their parents. So if parents have a perspective on this industry, now you have to influence the influencer of the child, right? So you have to amplify that change. You have to amplify the steps that are being taken towards, having a more inclusive environment, and, creating a culture that is conducive to everybody being able to succeed and grow. And so that's definitely something that's important that you touched on, is amplifying that message so that we can mitigate those type of stories and showcase how this industry is making strides to be more welcoming to people who come from all different backgrounds.
Absolutely.
So when we talk about, and over the last 2 years, we've had so many different things that have happened just because of COVID. And I know that that's affected educators, that's affected young people a lot. It's affected school in general a lot. But when you think about career projections, like, talk to me a little bit about what's on the horizon.
So much. And especially when I'm talking about construction, most careers are growing right now. That's really good news. We've heard a lot about like the low unemployment rate. We expect that to continue. And a lot of the reason for that has to do with the baby boomers having left the construction industry. You alluded a little bit to that earlier. But in addition to that, we expect lots of growth to continue. There's growth really across the sector, but the growth also is going to continue in areas that are new in construction. So if you think about things like construction technology, that's a fairly new area of construction, and things like solar photovoltaic installment. I don't know if you are familiar a lot with that, but like these are the people who install the solar panels. That actually is an area that's growing 52%. I've never heard of a career growing that much. That is the highest growth I can imagine of any career. And of course, that career actually doesn't require anything past a high school degree. So you get your high school diploma, and there's a career waiting for you. So, most of and that one, by the way, pays $46,500. Yes, the median salary. So there's a lot of careers out there paying really well in construction. And as you mentioned earlier, anywhere from a technical certification to community college, like an associate's, all the way up to a bachelor's degree, some with a master's. For example, you can get a master's in, construction management.
Yeah.
But certainly we expect that to continue. And then there's some specialty areas within that as well. I live in Louisiana right now. So with hurricanes, we're always having lots of construction go on, but also I'm from Kentucky. They had that tornado earlier in 2021, and we know that there's going to be areas where if you are flexible and can move, that might be something also to think about. Are you able to travel? So if you like traveling and you like to be in places and help people, that's another really wonderful thing to think about if you like the construction industry. So often people think, well, oh, there's good money and that's important, but you may like to be in construction because you like to help your community. I'm
Yes,
going to be
absolutely.
yeah, it's, this is just a very quick story. Line workers came and helped after Hurricane Ida. We didn't have power for 9 days. And one of the guys was out working on some lines, and my son went out to meet him, and he gave him like a Mississippi power hat. And my son was out there asking him what he liked the most about his job. And he said, I will never forget this because I thought it was such a really wonderful thing that he said. He said, I like helping people like you and your family to feel like they can be safe again and have power again. And it's really nice to know that I can help people when
Wow.
something goes wrong. And he said, I love working on power lines because I get to help people when something bad happens. I
Yeah.
thought that was such a wonderful thing that he said, so
Yep. Yep. No,
um
that is great. No, thanks for sharing that. I mean, and that's a perfect way to kind of end this segment, right? Where it's not just about building buildings and structures, but you have the opportunity to help and to serve others. And what more of a fulfilling job to say than, hey, it's not just what I built, but it's how I went about building it and, the lives that were impacted as a result. And so, Jennifer, I thank you for being with us today. It's been a pleasure having you. I mean, we could do this all day, every day. And so I am excited that you got a chance to join us today. Got to bring you back later on as we talk about more with young people and putting them in position to have visibility and exposure to careers. But thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. And I really am excited that you're doing this podcast.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks again, everybody, for tuning into our show. Remember, like, share, subscribe to the podcast, and join the movement as we reach to build a better future that we can all be proud of.